Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive. Today we're going to be zeroing in on some international relations stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically, an interaction between King Abdullah of Jordan and former President Trump.
Okay.
We've got this fascinating analysis of a video, and it
Yeah.
really gets into like the nitty-gritty of the power dynamics
Yeah,
and the fallout from this meeting.
Interesting.
And it might even offer some glimpses into, the future of the Middle East.
Wow.
It's pretty juicy stuff.
Well, what I find so interesting about this particular deep dive is we're not just looking at a headline.
Right.
We're really dissecting,
Yeah.
a really pivotal moment.
Like we're getting right into the nuance.
Yeah.
It's like a front row seat to
Gosh,
history in the making.
Yeah.
So before we get into, all the really like tense moments of this meeting,
Okay.
we need to kind of like rewind a little bit,
Sure.
set the scene.
All right.
So let's talk about the geopolitical landscape
Yeah.
at the time. We've got the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Right.
It's obviously a very complex web of historical tensions.
Uh-huh.
And of course, the U.S. has always played a pretty big role.
But yeah, the U.S. has always positioned itself as kind of a mediator in the region.
Like a peace broker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But during Trump's presidency,
Yeah.
his approach was really different
Oh,
from
yeah.
other administrations.
It was a huge departure from the norms.
Uh-huh.
And that shift is so apparent
Yeah.
in this interaction with King Abdullah.
Yeah.
The source actually describes Abdullah as looking incredibly uncomfortable
Oh, wow.
during this press conference.
Oh, really?
They even go so far as to compare him to like
Okay.
a hostage
Oh,
reading a statement under duress.
wow. That is,
It's really striking imagery.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what was going through his mind.
that description of King Abdullah
Yeah.
is a really key part of understanding this whole analysis. Because traditional diplomacy relies on tact,
Right.
subtle negotiation.
Behind closed doors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Trump,
Yeah.
he seemed to prefer a much more public and
Mhm.
confrontational style.
Yeah. It's like he traded the velvet glove for a bullhorn.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
It's interesting.
And this incident really illustrates how this kind of brute force diplomacy
Yeah.
can totally backfire.
Especially with these long-standing allies.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The source is arguing that
Okay.
publicly putting a leader like King Abdullah in such an uncomfortable position isn't just about disrespect.
Right.
It's about shifting the power dynamic.
So it's not just like a breach of etiquette.
No,
It's a calculated power play
it is.
with potential long-term consequences.
Yeah.
What kind of consequences are we talking about?
Well, think about it. You're a leader, and you've been publicly undermined by a supposed ally
Right.
that leads to mistrust,
Right.
which makes future cooperation and sharing intelligence less likely.
Okay.
Plus, it risks emboldening your adversaries.
Oh, because they sense a weakness in the alliance.
Yeah, it's like a crack in a foundation
Yeah.
that weakens the whole structure over time.
So we've got this tense geopolitical situation.
Right.
We've got this shift in U.S. diplomatic style.
Yeah.
Now let's get into the specifics of what was actually on the table during this meeting.
Okay.
The source points to Trump's agenda regarding Gaza, and that's where things get even more complicated.
So Trump's plan involved demands for Palestinian relocation.
Okay.
It was super controversial.
Yeah.
The analysis even uses the term ethnic cleansing
Wow.
to describe the policy.
Ethnic cleansing.
Yeah,
That's a loaded term.
it is.
Can you break down for our listeners what that means in this context?
Sure. It refers to the forced removal of a specific ethnic or religious group from a particular area.
Okay.
The source uses it
Yeah.
to draw attention to the potential consequences.
Of forcibly relocating Palestinians from Gaza. Right. Particularly the potential for these large-scale demographic shifts, regional instability,
Right.
and even violence erupting as a result. And these potential consequences weren't just abstract fears.
Right.
The source specifically highlights concerns for neighboring countries like Jordan,
Yeah.
Egypt, and even Israel.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The analysis details how each of these countries would be impacted
Okay.
by such a dramatic policy shift.
Yeah.
Jordan already has a substantial Palestinian population.
Right.
The source argues that a sudden influx of displaced people
Yeah.
could really strain their resources,
Right.
exacerbate existing social tensions,
Yeah.
and create this ripple effect
Yeah.
of instability throughout the region.
So as if the potential for regional destabilization wasn't enough,
Right.
we also have to factor in Trump's use of financial aid as leverage.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
The aid as a weapon tactic.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that? Sure. The source dives into how it reflects this transactional approach to foreign policy.
Okay.
And it can be so damaging.
It's like, do what I say or else.
Right.
It's like a mobster movie.
I know.
It seems like such a cold and manipulative way to handle international relations.
That's a good comparison.
Yeah.
This tactic boils down to using financial assistance as a bargaining chip to pressure countries into complying with U.S. demands.
Okay.
Instead of fostering collaboration,
Yeah.
it breeds resentment
Right.
and alienates allies.
And these are complex relationships.
Yes, they are.
Built on trust and shared interests.
Exactly.
So when you introduce this kind of coercion, it really undermines those foundations.
Yes, it does.
And this wasn't just like a one-time thing.
No, it wasn't.
This was a pattern in U.S.-Arab relations during Trump's presidency. No. So we're looking at a potentially significant shift in the geopolitical landscape. But did anyone push back against this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, there was some pretty notable resistance.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Who stood up to Trump?
Well, King Abdullah himself publicly rejected the idea of ethnic cleansing in Gaza.
That was a bold move.
It was.
Especially considering the circumstances.
Yeah, he was in a really delicate position, trying to maintain a relationship with the U.S. While upholding his own principles and protecting his country.
So even though he felt like that hostage, he still drew a line in the sand.
He did.
Interesting.
And he wasn't alone.
Oh.
Saudi Arabia also expressed concern.
Wow. So this wasn't just a minor disagreement.
No, it wasn't.
This was serious pushback.
It was.
What does that tell us about the state of things at the time?
Well, the source interprets this resistance as a turning point in U.S.-Arab relations.
Okay.
It suggests that these leaders weren't willing to just blindly follow the U.S. anymore, especially when it came to policies that they saw as harmful or against their interests.
So they were asserting their own agency on the global stage.
Yes.
This is fascinating.
And this is still playing out today.
I'm already feeling the tension, and we haven't even gotten to the part about potential uprisings.
Yeah, right.
Oh, man.
There's a whole other layer to this story.
Okay, well, don't go anywhere.
Okay.
We're going to explore how this diplomatic standoff connects to an even bigger and more volatile situation in the Middle East.
Okay.
So before the break, we were talking about that growing resistance to Trump's policies in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And this next part is kind of unsettling.
Okay.
The source issues a pretty stark warning about potential uprisings if Arab leaders were to just go along with Trump's demands.
Oh, wow.
Like if they just caved.
Yeah.
It's a chilling thought.
It is.
And they connect this potential for unrest directly to the resentment that many Palestinians feel.
Right.
A resentment that's rooted in decades of conflict and displacement.
Absolutely.
Forcing them to relocate.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be seen as just a political decision.
Right.
It would be another chapter in this long history of injustice.
Yeah.
It could very easily ignite widespread unrest.
Oh, yeah.
Not just in Gaza,
Right.
but across the whole region.
It's like adding fuel to a fire.
Yeah, exactly.
And it really gets to the heart of what the source is trying to convey.
Okay.
This isn't just about land. It's about the human cost,
right?
The displacements, the dispossession.
Yeah.
These things can drive people to do desperate things.
Right.
The source really emphasizes the fragility of peace in the Middle East.
Okay.
Arguing that any policy that's perceived as unjust, especially one as sensitive as forced relocation, could be devastating.
So in this context, Trump's approach seems not just insensitive, but reckless. It's like playing with dynamite.
Yeah, and you're picking up on a key point.
Okay.
The analysis suggests that Trump didn't really get it.
Get what?
The complexities of the region.
Right.
It was a blunt instrument.
Yeah.
Applied to a situation that needed nuance.
Yeah, and speaking of nuance, this is where the source's exploration of Gaza's history comes in.
Okay.
It was really insightful. They mentioned that even Israel's own finance minister acknowledged that most of Gaza's population are descended from families that were expelled from their homes from what is now Israel.
Right.
That adds a whole other layer.
It does. It's crucial.
Yeah.
Understanding that historical context helps us understand the magnitude of what Trump was suggesting.
Right.
Relocating Palestinians from Gaza wouldn't be simple.
No.
It would be seen by many as a continuation of a historical injustice, fueling that resentment even more.
Yeah, right. And potentially leading to more violence.
Exactly.
It becomes much more than a real estate deal.
It does.
It's about identity, belonging, and a sense of historical injustice.
That spans generations.
Yeah.
And when you threaten those things, the potential for violence increases.
It's interesting to think about how King Abdullah's response might have actually prevented things from getting even worse.
Yeah, his rejection of ethnic cleansing was huge.
It was a strong signal to the U.S., to the whole region, that some Arab leaders were willing to prioritize morals and ethics over politics.
It was risky, but it showed commitment to principles. It might have helped calm things down a bit.
So he was taking a stand not just for Jordan, but for a more humane approach to this conflict.
He could definitely interpret it that way.
And it wasn't just symbolic. This act of defiance might have given other leaders courage to speak out.
Like Saudi Arabia.
Right, even close. U.S. allies.
Exactly.
It says a lot about the shifting dynamics.
And this shift could have big implications for U.S. influence.
How so?
Well, if even your allies start to question you, that erodes trust.
Right.
The source suggests that this could lead to a reconfiguration of alliances.
Like, what do you mean?
Like Arab states finding new partners who are more aligned with their interests.
So maybe looking to China or Russia to fill the void.
Exactly.
That's a big shift.
It is.
So we've covered a lot. Diplomatic humiliation, controversial policies, acts of resistance, and the potential for unrest. What's the takeaway?
I think the takeaway is that Trump's approach to diplomacy in the Middle East was disruptive and possibly destabilizing. It showed a disregard for the region's complexities. It alienated allies, and it made things worse. He might have gotten some short-term wins, but the long-term consequences could be huge.
We're talking about a ripple effect that could last for years.
It's pretty sobering.
It is.
And it raises some big questions.
Like what?
About the future of the U.S. in the region. Is there a path back
to that collaborative relationship?
Can the damage be repaired? Or is the landscape shifted permanently?
Those are tough questions.
They are.
And I don't think there are any easy answers.
I agree.
But I think that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. It's not just about what happened. It's about what it all means. It's about thinking critically about these issues and talking about the future of international relations.
I couldn't agree more.
It's about going beyond the headlines and diving into the nuances, the historical context, and the human stories. That's what makes this kind of analysis so important.
It really is.
All right, I think we're ready to wrap up this part. But before we do, I want to leave our listeners with a thought. We've seen how this one event can reveal these bigger trends and have huge consequences.
It's true.
It reminds us that the world is interconnected.
It is.
And that actions have ripple effects.
Absolutely.
So stay informed and never underestimate the power of a single moment.
Yeah, it's wild how just one event can really act like a lens to see these bigger global shifts.
Exactly.
It makes you realize how important it is to, stay informed.
Oh, absolutely.
And keep digging deeper.
This deep dive is a perfect example.
But
we started with this interaction.
Between King Abdullah and Trump.
But look where we ended up.
I know.
Talking about the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
U.S. diplomacy.
Regional instability, global alliances.
The world is full of these interconnected stories.
It's true.
And we have to try to understand them.
It's like one of those big, intricate tapestries.
Oh, yeah.
Every thread matters.
I see what you mean.
To see the whole picture, you got to understand how those threads connect.
Yeah, in this case, the threads are all those historical events. The political decisions.
To personalities, even.
All of it.
It's fascinating.
It is.
And sometimes it's the smallest thread.
The
one you think doesn't matter, that can unravel the whole thing.
That's why I love these deep dives.
Me too.
We're not just skimming the surface, pulling those threads.
Trying to find those connections.
Seeing how seemingly random events are related.
Yeah, it's about really understanding what shapes our world.
The choices we make.
The consequences of those choices.
We're like detectives.
I was just thinking that.
Piecing together the clues.
Following the evidence.
To get to the truth.
And the truth is, the world is way more complicated than we usually realize.
And that awareness is how we can start to tackle the problems we face.
It's about understanding the nuance.
Absolutely.
Embracing that complexity.
I hope our listeners are out there exploring and questioning.
Connecting the dots.
Don't be afraid to dive deep.
Yeah. Challenge your assumptions.
Embrace the complexity.
You never know what you might discover.
Every deep dive is a chance to learn.
I agree.
To grow.
To broaden our understanding.
Be curious.
Yes.
Seek out different perspectives.
Engage in those conversations.
It's how we make sense of it all.
Well said.
Thanks.
I think that's a wrap for this deep dive.
Great deep dive.
Thanks.
But the conversation doesn't have to end here.
Keep exploring.
Keep questioning.
Share your thoughts.
Do your own deep dive.
Stay curious, everyone.
Yeah.
And keep those minds engaged.